Everybody, welcome back to the channel. It is me, OC Steve. So I thought, let's discuss the Geek Week that was. Let's talk about some of the events that happened, digest it, give you my 2 cents. So let's get into it. We started the week out with an announcement that Henry Cavill, Superman himself, The Witcher, is going to take on the role of the Highlander in a reboot of the original series that came out in '86. He's going to be the main man in the kilt, if you will, and it'll be directed by John Wick director Chad Stahelski. So, I think this is a reboot. I know everybody gets nerd outrage about reboots, but I think this is one that's finally due. I have enjoyed the original film series, the TV series, and then even the TV series and the movies themselves kind of interwove, overlapped, and then they carried on Duncan MacLeod, which is Connor MacLeod's cousin. If you follow the TV series, it was all about Duncan, and then eventually they met in a movie, and then Christopher Lambert decided to give up the sword, pass it on to Duncan, and that continued the series, but from there, it kind of didn't really go anywhere. So I think this is a great reboot where everybody's complaining, crying, flipping out about reboots. This is well overdue in my mind. Henry Cavill has mastered swordplay with The Witcher. He's actually of Scottish descent. So we're actually getting somebody who has Scottish blood playing a Scotsman, unlike in the '86 film where you had Christopher Lambert, a French actor portraying a Scotsman with a really bad, cringeworthy accent. You had Sean Connery portraying Ramirez, his mentor in the movie, who is a Scotsman portraying a Spaniard. There was a lot of European mixture in that melting pot of a movie. If I have the Blu-ray edition of this film, you see a bunch of wire work and a lot of stuff that's really bad when you boost it up to that almost 180p, if not more and above detail for this 1986 film. It was a fun fantasy frolic, if you will, for its time it was made. It's definitely a piece. It's a time capsule of the 80s, high action, crazy octane, that whole bit and that whole 9 yards. So them kind of really delving into the source material, providing some Scottish context, I think would be well needed. Henry Cavill's already doing his homework. He's researching his Scottish lineage, learning different sword styles. So I think that this can only do better than the '86 film. The only thing that I think that they probably can't top for the 1986 Highlander movie is the soundtrack done by Queen. Next to the Flash Gordon soundtrack, that is a soundtrack of the 1980s, another one done by Queen themselves. So I hope they don't get some modern day kind of, trance house or whatever. That is just, if they find a way to take some of the songs from Queen, maybe find a band that can emulate them and make that kind of the running theme into this reboot of Highlander, I would enjoy that. So then we got Zack Snyder. Lord help him. He's trying to stay relevant in any way, shape, and possible form right now. Obviously, Army of the Dead came out last week on Netflix. It has mixed reviews. Honestly, I tried to watch it. I couldn't get too far into it. This is the same guy that brought us in '04, the Dawn of the Dead reboot, and I enjoyed that a lot. That script was written by Guardians of the Galaxy creator James Gunn. But he's trying to change the narrative and say he's trying to do a George Romero. Obviously, the godfather of zombie films had underlying messages that you could read into the movie other than just zombie fun and craziness. Dawn of the Dead, originally in the late 70s, was about consumerism. It made fun of that we all went to the mall in different ways and different reasons, whether that was our craving to get something. So it became almost a subliminal message that when you become a zombie, you would go to the mall to consume, to buy, to participate in commerce, if you will. The original Night of the Living Dead had an undertone in it about discussing, the civil rights movement and racism and the controversial ending. Did they shoot the main protagonist that survived because they either thought he was a zombie or due to the color of his skin? It left you with that open-ended question as the militia went by shooting them. So that was very kind of subdued controversy at the time. You had Dawn of the Dead in the 70s that was discussing, consumerism. And then in the 80s, you had Day of the Dead, which was kind of making fun and poking at the military industrial complex at the time, and was kind of another, allegory, if you will, to make fun of, you know, the extremism and machismoism of the military that was going on during the height of the Cold War. So with this movie, Zack Snyder's trying to tap into that vein and say that he has another message, because the movie is being railed in reviews. Nobody can really get through it. It's a long movie. It's very arduous. It's over 2 hours and 30 odd minutes or 20 minutes. I could barely get through the first 15 because it was killing my brain cells. Like a zombie was going after my brain. So he's trying to say, wait a minute. I want you guys to watch it because there is an underlying message in this that I'm trying to discuss. You know, the Orange Man and the issue of the wall is in my movie, which is Army of the Dead, because the whole premise of the movie is there is a zombie viral outbreak that hits Las Vegas, and they quarantine Las Vegas with scene containers to look very much kind of like the border wall, is what Zack is trying to say. And the people that were near Vegas could potentially be affected. So they're put into internment camps that are next to the wall, kind of like how we're the whole issue of border exchange, if you will. So that's what he's trying to say. It's relevant. It's a discussion that I'm trying to bring up in the form of my movie by conveying it through zombies. I mean, he's really out in the weeds with this justification. This movie was bad. It was long, drawn out, you know, just schlock, if you will. There's a whole sequence with a zombie tiger where a guy's getting killed that just goes on for way too long. We could have just had a psychological illusion. You know, Red Letter Media discussed it. I highly suggest watching their video because they pretty much said all he did was just copy and paste the parts of Aliens into this movie. And he's trying to say that it's not something that it is already. So it's just a bad rendition. Dave Bautista wasn't great in it, in my mind, as a leading actor. He's a great, you know, secondary backup actor, but as a leading man, I think his time has came and went for any opportunities that presents itself. Back when I was growing up earlier, this kind of movie, you know, we have direct to streaming now, which in the 90s in the Blockbuster area would have been direct to video. It would have been a movie that a studio wasn't confident was going to make money, even in a non-pandemic world. I don't see this movie coming out in theaters at all. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And then the other thing that got released by the House of Ideas that's becoming conceptually bankrupt, Marvel Studios put out their trailer for The Eternals. You know, this is finally the first trailer, but all we really saw was the heroes. They're kind of these immortal beings that were created by the Celestials, which you see in the Guardians of the Galaxy. They went to different planets and they created experiments. They created 2 different species out of kind of the early evolutionary creations of were happening on planets. They created the Eternals, which are these godlike beings, beacons of hope that hope we aspire and admire to. And then they created the Deviants, which are kind of the demons. We didn't see the Deviants in this trailer at all, but based on the imagery that you see here, these are very bland kind of asexual outfits. There's a Bollywood sequence in it. I don't really know who they're trying to cater to with this. When you try to hit every single check mark and make sure that everything's done, there's really no substance to it. It takes away from what Kirby tried to create when he came back to Marvel Comics in the 70s. Kind of had a departure, had a falling out with Marvel, went over to DC, created the New Gods. Obviously, the New Gods movie is not happening at this time. DC didn't want to roll the dice on this film, but Marvel decided to roll the dice on its kind of cousin, if you will, which is the Eternals. But we don't see any conflict. We just see these godlike beings kind of hanging around, doing stuff, participating in dance numbers, having weddings, doing weird stuff. But we haven't seen the Deviants. We haven't really seen the, you know, kind of villains of this movie. And those are always kind of the weird things with the current Marvel movies in themselves, is that we never see the villains. We kind of see some action sequences. We kind of see some schlock, but we never see the big bads. They give us this weird rendition. And the reason why I think these costumes are bland, and I'm showing a comparison, is look what Jack Kirby did in the 70s. No costume on any single one of these Eternals is exactly the same. Shapes are dynamic. They're different. Color palettes are different as well. It's just not in service of what Jack Kirby was trying to do in the latter half of his artistic career, besides being an artist and becoming a creator of content. So I don't know who this Eternal movie's for, but I definitely know it's not for me and it's not my cup of tea. So then going lastly, DC Comics put out the second bit of announcements for their adaptation, Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. Now, if you're not familiar with Sandman or Neil Gaiman, he's the guy that has brought you Good Omens on Amazon. He has also brought you American Gods on Stars. He brought you the stop motion animation film Coraline and the kind of homage love letter to the Princess Bride known as Stardust. So this was one of his long-running comic book series. It was on the DC Vertigo imprint, which was stuff that was adjacent to the DC universe. This was stuff where you didn't necessarily have to adhere to the continuity that was happening in DC Comics. They didn't have to worry about what Superman, Batman, the Justice League, and everybody else was doing. This kind of stuck on a higher ethereal plane, and you can mess around with more metaphysical concepts. So essentially, the main focus of Sandman is it's him and his weird family of the Endless. And the Endless are 7 entities, each representing a different metaphysical thing. Obviously, Dream, aka Morpheus, represents dreams, concepts, and ideas. His sister is Death. Desire is nebulous. It depends on who you are. If it's male or female, there's destruction, desire, the whole 9. They represent all these human emotions and conflicts, and it's their struggle to get along with each other kind of on this endless plane, and kind of has a rotating cast of characters that come into it because it literally spans all of time. One of the characters that kind of inhabits this narrative is John Constantine's great-grandmother, Joanna Constantine. So it's them having mortals that interfere with their experience while fighting with each other. It's very convoluted, kind of philosophical and metaphysical concepts. I never really got into Sandman myself. It was kind of one of those convoluted things. I didn't really feel like I needed to read a highbrow comic book. I was more of a guy that enjoyed Hellboy, X-Men, Dark Horse, Lobo, gritty action, high octane, not kind of theoretical and conceptual ideas and dealing with kind of this higher plane of existence stuff. Wasn't my cup of tea. Obviously, it was for some. It had a long-running span on the Vertigo and DC respective imprint. If you went to San Diego Comic-Con like I did with my brother when I was a kid, you'd always go to the DC booth. You'd always go to the Marvel booth. Everybody was having this. And then there was always kind of these emo people in a corner that were talking about Constantine, and they were talking about Sandman in itself. And it's a byproduct of where Neil Gaiman came from. He was growing up at that time in Britain. It's very reminiscent. The imagery, the style is very much reminiscent of the British goth scene. Case in point, you got Dream, who practically looks like Robert Smith from The Cure, along with his sister Death, that kind of is reminiscent of Nico as a rock and roll artist from the 70s. That kind of is that look, that very ultra kind of sleek, stylized British goth look. But the thing that everybody's losing their goat on right now is the fact of the second cast announcements that came out, because, there's somebody who's non-binary. They're playing the pronoun game. They want to make sure that it's not the pronouns for the character. It's the pronouns for the actors, actresses, and cast that are a part of the actual ensemble that will take place for the adaptation of Sandman. So my thing is this. They try to throw this out there because they want to create buzz. They create buzz by putting out this announcement and getting a reaction out of lifelong comic book fans that are going to clash with modern day SJWs. They want this argument to create a media buzz, a groundswell, if you will. So these people bumping heads will get normal 9-to-5 people that don't pay attention to comic books, pop culture, and the geek atmosphere to catch their eyes on this and wonder what this argument's about and what's going on. So it creates interest in normally a series that nobody would really care about. It has its own place. It has its own existence, but they're trying to prop it up to bring it into your attention, to bring it into your sphere of notification, if you will. Now, I'm going to challenge my geek brothers and sisters, respectively, not to engage into these clickbait traps. You see this announcement. If you don't like it, don't participate. They are rigging the system so you go in there, get mad, get upset, and ultimately it's going to boil down to a superficial argument where they're going to attack you by calling you an ist, a phobe, whatever terminology they want to use, because they already know that they want to be right. They don't want to engage in an actual intellectual conversation about pop culture and comics. So recognize the traps when you see them. When you see this, when you see announcements of Impulse, when they either gender bend or do whatever they do with a character to create outrage, it's a trap. Like Admiral Akbar, it's a trap. Don't engage. It's an argument that they've already rigged to make you look bad. I would say stay away from it. If you love the series, then go buy the back issues. Go support that original material. Don't vote, you vote with your dollars. Don't participate. Don't watch that streaming series if it's not your cup of tea, because they want the argument. They want the fight because they want to be right at the end of the day. So don't engage. I know it's easier said than done, but don't do it. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your energy. Support things that you enjoy that are moving forward with original concepts, creations, and ideas. So in closing, I want to highlight 2 crowdfunding campaigns that I would say that you'd be remiss if you didn't participate and you didn't back right now. So let's go into those. Just dropped last night. Half creator of Graveyard Shift, Mark Polton, has put out another book. It is Viking Wolf. This is a great kind of concept. If you want something that is unapologetic, like heavy metal used to be, that's gory, action-oriented, intense, Viking Nordic craziness, death metal to the next level, then I highly recommend getting Viking Wolf. You're going to have a good time with it. This is not a book for kids. So let's put that R rating out there. This is not PG-13 happy frolics. This is for fun action. If you're a fan of Lobo, if you're a fan of Viking Nordic metal, if you like Werewolf in London, if you enjoyed Graveyard Shift, this is definitely up your alley. You're going to want to participate in this campaign. Now, if you want something that's a taste of the different, if you want to have your toxic masculinity up to 11, and you want to have some fun making fun of some more of the sillier areas and eras of 80s cartoons, I recommend Ethan Van Sciver's Rainbow the Brute. It's focusing on the last man in fairyland finding out that his son has been having low levels of toxic masculinity because he's been raised by his mom, Paulina Pocket. So it's a father and son adventure where he's going to have to break his son out of his shell and maybe learn to be a better dad, the concept, through this weird imaginative retelling of the 1980s fairyland. You have Polly Pocket, you have Rainbow the Brute, which is, Rainbow Bright. You have My Girthy Stallions, which are the My Pony replacements, and many other kind of 80s original ideas that are happening in this campaign. There's a great book that Ethan Van Sciver wants to put out on the shelf that's called Cool Story Bro, Tales of Toxic Masculinity, where he takes more of these feminine-oriented concepts, flips them on their head, makes them about 11 with the HGH and the man and machismo and testosterone, and puts them out there. It's going to be a book for fun. If you're not even have friends and family, this would be a perfect stocking stuffer or a joke holiday gift to give to them just as a fun read. It has some of the best artists, writers, and talent in Comicsgate right now, lending their abilities to this book. So I highly recommend, if you don't want to get Rainbow the Brute, to get Cool Story Bro. So that's the news for now. Just wanted to throw in my 2 cents and say, hey, like I said before, don't engage in these crazy traps. Just know when you see them, it's better to walk away than lose your cool and engage in these people that only exchange in currency of getting you mad, getting you aggravated, trying to get you canceled, and making you look like an idiot. So stay positive, have fun, enjoy pop culture. More importantly, continue the discussion in the comments below. I want to know what you thought about Highlander, Army of the Dead, the Eternals, so on and so forth. So if you like pop culture, please give me a thumbs up, share this video with your fellow pop culture purveyors, and let's just have a good time, and subscribe to the channel. This is a little labor of love for me, but I enjoy having a good conversation, highlighting good crowdfunding campaigns, so you guys don't miss out and you enjoy the ride, because Lord knows the big two are trying to silence anybody who's trying to have fun outside of their box. So have a good one. Have a great Memorial Day, and we'll talk next time. Alrighty. Peace.